Best.Podcast.Ever is brought to you by the Gertzberg Law Firm, a full-service business and litigation firm in Cleveland, Ohio. Practical and results-driven, the award-winning attorneys at Gertzberg Law have both in-house corporate and large firm backgrounds and have built a one-of-a-kind firm that is changing the way clients engage, work with, and pay for their attorneys. Visit GertzbergLaw.com to learn how we're different. Gertzberg Law Firm. We solve problems. Enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to listen to the best podcast ever recorded.
Hi, Nellie Gertzberg-Selby.
Hi, Alex Gertzberg.
How are you?
I'm okay. Good
Are
to
you-
be here.
It's good to have you here.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's unusual.
You're sitting where Molly usually sits.
I hope that I can fill her chair.
Well, oh man, if Molly was here, she would have a really good retort to that.
I think she does a great job.
She's
And
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But today I'm glad I'm here.
I'm glad you're here.
I have questions.
You do?
I do.
For who?
For their guest.
Who is our guest?
Our guest is John Cunningham.
Yes, he is.
And I know Alex is very excited for this guest as well.
I'm super excited. John Cunningham is a fella I met a few years ago when I was looking for a meditation retreat to go to. And insight meditation is it's a type of meditation, but it's also an organization. And there's one on the East Coast, there's one on the West Coast, and John heads up, and I really don't know how affiliated there are, so we'll ask him, but he heads up one called, well, I guess it's the Insight Meditation Center of Cleveland. I think I could be totally full
These
of
are
it.
good things to ask him when
Yes,
he gets here
yeah,
to clarify.
We're going to just rank speculation along the way. Did I use that verb? That's not, edit that out.
Well, if it's not a
We're going to
real
rankly-
phrase, you can start using it, and other people might start as well.
I think what I meant
was
to
it?
say is I'm going to rankly speculate.
That sounds even worse. That sounds like something that smells bad.
No, I'm going to speculate rankly. Let's speculate rankly about John, shall we?
It's lost all meaning. Okay.
Speculating
Speculating rankly.
So, John, if I may speculate rankly, is head of some organization that is loosely affiliated with the Insight Meditation Center of Massachusetts or wherever else. But it is mindfulness-based meditation, as opposed to like transcendental meditation.
This is one of the questions I was going to ask. To compare these, so I think we're going to want to know about mindfulness and meditation itself.
Yes.
But it's hard to find information about him as a person that teaches. He's a teacher.
Yeah.
He teaches mindful parenting group.
Yeah.
I want to get into that. But I don't want to spend the whole time talking about mindfulness.
Yeah.
A lot of it, but...
And the reason I asked him to be on our podcast is because I've asked his counsel. I have actually asked him for his counsel several times, having gone through some difficult situations, and he has a really great way of explaining his philosophy in a I'm having trouble talking today, Nellie. In a non-forcing it down your throat kind of way. Is there a word for that? Forcing, non.
Yes.
I don't know.
It'll come to me later. I can edit it in.
Edited it.
It's like aggressive versus passive, or active versus.
Right. This is the part of the show where Nellie and Alex don't know how to speak English.
But we like playing with our words.
Right.
Alex,
And
did you go on the boat?
we did.
How
We
was
went
that?
boating. It was all right. It was good. It was a fun day for it.
I was thinking it's funny because while you were on a boat, we didn't come because we were going kayaking, but we were on a boat too.
We were all on a boat.
We were all on boats,
We were
just not the
boating.
same one.
Yeah.
Boating? It was nice.
Boating was nice. It was relatively uneventful. Well, I guess it was kind of eventful because we went tubing, and we've now been tubing 2 weekends in a row. And the first time we went, we put the kids out there, and they were on the tube for, like 2 hours. This time...
Are you moving the boat while they're back there?
Oh, yeah.
Not fast, are you?
Super fast.
That's why I don't go with my son. Okay.
Well, no, your kid's 10, like a year old. He wouldn't dig it.
I don't know about tubing.
What we learned this time is that if you are going in your boat and then you just cut it to one direction, then you create this. You start swinging the tube around your boat, and it creates centrifugal force that goes much faster than your boat does.
And then a kid runs into the boat.
No, but that would be funny.
No, it wouldn't.
What happened? No, but what does happen is it invariably leaves the wake, right? So the wake behind your boat is actually kind of smooth. But once you get outside of the wake of your boat, then you start hitting the regular waves of the lake. And so you swing that thing around, and it doesn't take more than a few seconds for it to throw everybody off of the tube. And this time this time we went with some folks in my neighborhood, and the patriarch of that family bit it really hard. When we did that, we call it the circle of fire. When we did the circle of fire, oh no, they called it the circle of death. Then after, which is not a good name for that move, and he bit it really hard. So when he got back in the boat, I go, next time we're just gonna do the circle of nominal discomfort.
That's a good idea. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Did you ever get on the tube?
Well, no, because I'm the only one that can drive the boat.
Well, that's probably good that you didn't then.
Yeah, the kids dug it, and there's a lot of people jump. Like, it's pretty funny when you're going really fast and everyone bites it, because you see basically like 4 people flying off the thing in 4 different directions.
Did they fly into the water? Off the boat into the water? Or just off the tube?
Off the tube into the water, but in multiple directions. It's almost like a firework.
If everyone's given consent, I suppose.
Well, in retrospect, I realized that as a lawyer, I should have definitely had them sign releases before doing that.
I'm sure that doesn't speak to your lawyering abilities.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, this is something that comes up.
I have a question, actually.
Go.
Is there a verb for what a lawyer does? What do you do?
Practicing law.
You practice law.
We practice law.
Sorry, go on.
No, but it brings up an interesting dilemma for lawyers, which is, when do you put on your lawyer hat with friends and family, right? Because I've definitely had clients come in the door saying, all right, I'm putting up this, this is an actual thing that happened. I had a client a number of years ago say, I'm putting up a zip line in my backyard, and it's going to be badass, right? It's going to be so badass that the entire neighborhood is going to want to use it. Only I'm not going to be back there monitoring them all the time. What should I do? And I said, number one, go Nelly.
Put up a sign?
Put up a sign.
At your own risk?
No, you put up a sign saying, you're not allowed to go on here. You are trespassing, right? If you know that they're going to be using it anyway, the thing to do is to disable it, right? Like, take the thing off the track so that they cannot use it, right? That gives you maximum protection, because there's a doctrine in the law called the attractive nuisance doctrine, which basically says that if you have some implement in your backyard that you already know everyone's going to use, and it is inherently unsafe, and you're taking you're making no effort to protect the community, you really can't say, oh, I didn't know they were trespassing.
That sounds like the same. Is that the same reason you have to have a fence up if you have a backyard pool?
It might be.
I kind of feel like that's for, like, so deer don't fall in and drown.
No.
That's not why?
No, that's pretty funny, though.
I thought something with insurance then.
I'm pretty sure the law does not care about
so
the deer.
Kids don't
But it could be it could be that there's a statute, a law that says there has to be a fence around your pool, or a local ordinance. But that is a good idea, for sure, to basically make it known that you are taking steps.
You don't condone,
or that you're not reckless about it. Right? There's probably a lot of other things that you can do in that situation.
This episode's going to be full of legal tips. Is this the first episode that we will have the post-show legal tip?
I think so. I think it is the first show. One.
I'm sure everyone should stay tuned for that.
They should. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be with our good friend Meg Pauken.
I like her a lot.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's good people. What else should we talk about, Nellie?
I don't know. I think this has all been so interesting. I'm thinking, what could I possibly cut out when I find out?
Solid
How
banter.
do I take anything out? It's all gold.
Let's see. Nellie, have you ever meditated?
Yes.
You have?
Yes. I'm much more successful when I do it with other people. So, like, I was in I met up with a group once a week when I was living in California on campus. There was a meditation group. So I think I sat with them. I like being guided by someone else.
Yeah.
And surrendering in that way. There's also a really nice temple on, I want to say on Euclid, East 185th, somewhere around there. And that has a nice Sunday morning sitting meditation, and then you get up and you walk. Do a walking meditation halfway through.
Yeah.
And there's a little talk involved too. I used to do that before I got married and had kids. And
you've never had a consistent meditation practice, though, it sounds like.
No, not independently, and not more than once a week.
Okay.
No, not consistent.
Yeah, I will tell you that when I have consistently meditated, like meaning string a bunch of them together over the course of like a week or a month, one a day or two a day, it's been a total game changer for me. It has quieted that monkey mind, right? There was that quote, I think it was, the book is called The Untethered Soul. I forget who wrote it, but he made the analogy that the voice that you hear in your head is like a roommate that won't shut up, right? And he's always chattering and he's always judging and he's always telling you what's good and what's bad, right? And if you had that person as a real roommate, you would shoot him. You would go insane. But the fact that it's the voice in your head, you think it's you. One of the points of meditation is to realize that that's not you, that is your voice, right? That is a voice. So I'm, for all of those reasons, I'm very excited about John being here because what he teaches has been a really important part of my life. And I also just really enjoy talking to him. He's I don't want to hype it up too much because, I don't know, maybe he'll, what if John comes over and he's just like, I don't have anything to say to you. You guys are jokers.
Well.
He's probably not going to say that.
I feel like you may be inviting a lot of guests on that you have man crushes on.
I have man crushes on a lot of guests.
You do.
I'm okay with that.
That's okay.
I'm comfortable.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm excited for you to be. I know that you like to surround yourself with people that you admire and want to be more like.
That is true.
I think that's a good reason to have the podcast. It's a good representation of models, role models.
Yeah.
People to learn from and strive to be like.
You know.
Or hug and kiss all day.
No, but you bring up a really good point. I'm glad that you said that because people totally underestimate the power that you have by asking questions and being fearless about asking questions, right? I have called authors of books I've read and told them, I don't get this part of your book. Can you explain it to me? And started great relationships that way.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
I feel like an author would really enjoy that.
It's amazing how many very well-known authors give up their time to their readers too. But yeah, or just, I don't know. I think that people often live in fear of people saying no to them, or live in fear of embarrassment. And
I'm gonna go check the door.
Go check the door. That may be John.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, John.
John, yeah.
Hey, come on in.
Really nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yeah.
Good. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no, glad to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a little time for us to get here, but we're here. So.
Yeah. Oh, and you've been very understanding.
Oh,
with
no
all
problem.
of
It's not a problem.
We ready? We good?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So,
I'm
all
not,
right.
I'm not the usual host, so
Okay.
yeah.
Do I need to be any? Can I just be?
We'll move this
You're
a little
good.
closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You get the more.
So I feel like you have a very calm, soothing voice. I want to pick up all of it.
All right.
And transmit all that calm and soothness to all of our listeners.
Just power punch that calmness out
Oh
there.
man, they're gonna get hit by all of that peacefulness. They won't even know what to do with it.
They're gonna get punched in the face with soothing kindness. Can soothe be a noun?
Yeah.
A soothe.
Yeah, why not?
It is now, the way you used
We
it.
spend an inordinate amount of time dissecting grammar here.
We shouldn't, because we
I
have
know.
so much to talk about now that
Okay.
John's here.
So, John, all right, what you don't know, John, is that we've actually already been talking about you for the last half hour or so during our banter part of the show.
Some things we'll ask you to clarify that we weren't sure
Yeah.
about.
Sure.
We were speculating rankly. So, it's what I'd love to hear in a minute or two is how you came to be a meditation instructor.
Yeah.
I also would.
Right. But before we get there, I would like to hear your thoughts on mindfulness versus meditation,
Okay.
right? Because both are concepts that you hear a lot about today.
Right.
Which is another question I have about why we're hearing so much more of it today than we used to.
Sure.
So take either of those questions in whatever order you want, John.
All right, so let's start with what's the difference between meditation and mindfulness. Meditation is a tool that we use, a technique to cultivate mindfulness. So it's a process that you go through. It's a formal process that has instructions about what to do, how to use your body and mind.
Could you say that meditation is like the gym where you train your mindfulness muscle?
Yes, exactly.
Ooh,
Right.
that's good.
It's a good
Nellie.
analogy.
That's good. Yeah, I used the idea of a driving range before to get ready for golf. You know, which is, I use it because I don't play golf. So, but no, the gym is exactly, it's that. It's learning. And if you think of it as a gym, what you're doing at the beginning in the gym is you're learning, where are these muscles? Where are they in the body? You don't just go in and start doing all the things that a gym teacher would have you do. You learn, where are those muscles? And more importantly, you learn, what does it feel like for me to move those muscles? What does that feel like for me? And so when we talk about meditation, that's the process of learning. What does it mean to be present? What does that even mean? It's so easy to say that, to have it roll off the tongue, to think, well, of course I'm present. I'm in the room. Here's Nellie, here's Alex, here's John. How am I not present? Yeah. But my mind is not present. My mind is caught up in other things. So the idea of being present, mindfulness, is to really be with the moment as it's happening. Whatever's going on, the body, the mind, the stories of the mind, the feelings, the emotions that come up, to really be present to those, and to be less caught up in I'll say the content of those things, and more to the process of what's going on. And we use meditation as a tool to help us learn how to do that.
The goal is mindfulness. Meditation's the route.
Right. Yeah, and so that brings us to the second question that you asked, Alex, of why do we hear so much about this now? And it's like anything that happens in our society. When there's some value to something, we suddenly start hearing a lot about that, and all these different varieties of it that are out there. So mindfulness is a catchphrase now for a lot of different things. In some cases, it means paying attention, right? I've heard people talk about, and actually I've seen where they're doing training for people who do like operations of plants to be mindful, which means pay attention. Just pay attention to what you're doing. That's different than what we're talking about here. So mindfulness in the everyday terminology, we could say maybe that's paying attention, just paying attention to what you're doing. Don't text and drive, if you will. Mindfulness, the way we're talking about it in the context of you know, I don't know what else to call it, presence, if I could call it that, is being aware of what's going on below these stories that we're paying attention to. What's going on below that? What is the process that goes on in our mind and body? What is that process? And seeing below, by seeing below the story, coming to know how we actually operate in the world. So for example, let's take anger as an example. Something happens, let's say in traffic, somebody cuts out in front of you and you notice you've gotten angry. So the mind will do two things. So the first thing is there's this big story about, I can't believe that guy did that. He saw me there, and just run off, and the body gets caught up on fire and everything. The process is the body getting caught up on fire, and the underlying stress that is induced in our mind by that event. The story is the words that come out. I can't believe this is going on. I can't believe that guy did it. Or maybe we judge ourselves. I can't believe I was following so closely. Whatever it happens to be. So that's why we want to differentiate between, I'll say, mindfulness in the common vernacular, the everyday use that you see all over the place, which we could think of more as paying attention, and mindfulness that we get by training ourselves through meditation to begin to see, what is this process here? What's the truth? What's really going on here?
So one way that I think meditation helps that process is because you put yourself into a state of mind and a body state where you can listen to the chatter in your brain, in your mind, right?
Right.
And also afterwards, you start to pay attention to what your body is doing in those stressful situations.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And that, when I hear you say cultivate, that's what I understand you mean. You train that muscle, really that attention muscle more than anything else, to start noticing that when somebody cuts you off in traffic, you suddenly go into this fight or flight situation, and your heart starts beating faster and your blood pressure goes up and you just start seeing red.
Right.
And if you can create that space so that you're not reacting, but you're paying attention, which in my case was something that definitely was created more through meditation.
Right.
And you're able to pay attention more, and notice it more.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you're doing when you're, let's go back to this idea of a process versus content, if we can differentiate that way, where the content is what we're angry about, whatever the situation is, and the process is the anger itself, okay? The content always changes. We can never solve the content, because in this moment, it's one guy pulling out in front of us. Later on, it's something that happens at work. Then it's the slow clerk at Starbucks. Then it's something on the news, on political situation. It's always, the content's always changing. We will never live long enough to solve all those problems, if we could even begin to. But the process is different, because as we begin to see what is going on here, begin to understand this flight or fight or freeze type of situation that arises when we feel anger, what is that like in here? It does two things. The first thing it does is it begins to diffuse the energy that traps us. If I know this is just my body reacting to that fight or flight or freeze, it's just what my body does. That's what happens here.
Right.
It's just the nature. I begin to loosen, it begins to loosen its hold on me. Then when it loosens its hold on me, there's a kind of a normalization process that goes on. Oh yeah, I recognize this is anger, this is frustration, this is fear. Whatever it happens to be, I begin to recognize these things when they come. And they are always the same. They differ in amplitude, how strong they are.
Right.
But anger feels like anger for us. Fear feels like fear for us. So once we learn the nature of that fear, again from a process perspective, one of the ways to say it is we can begin to make friends with it, begin to accept it, begin to realize it's not something I'm doing. I didn't bring it on. I didn't sit here and say, I think I'll be afraid. What do I have to do to be afraid? It just arises. So we're not really the ones that are in control of when that arises, but we can begin to see this is what's going on. It begins to dislodge its capacity to take hold of us when that happens. And then the second part of that is what you were talking about, Alex. As we do that, we begin to see that these mind states that arise, that are induced by these, really they're hormones that are being released in the body, you know, adrenaline, cortisol, these types of things which flood our system, that these thoughts are induced by that process. If we give those thoughts credence and believe them to be real, we create more of a stress reaction in the body, which creates more of that thought induction, which it's a cycle that goes on until it burns itself out. But if we can begin to see these thoughts are arising just because of what's going on in my body, I don't have to energize them. Then what happens is they arise and they drop away.
Right. So I, every once in a while, will talk to somebody about meditating, and they will say to me, well, I couldn't do it because my mind just jumps around too much and I can't sit still. Mm-hmm. Do you hear that too?
I hear that a lot, yeah.
What do you say to those folks?
What do you do when you're asleep? I would like to watch you sleep if you
Right.
can't sit still.
Right.
It's a mind state that we can't sit still. Now, that's not to say there are people that have some physical situation that makes it difficult for them, but it's a belief we hold. If you say, I can't sit still, guess
Right.
what? You won't be able to sit still.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's the idea of these mind states coming in, and we believe them when they appear here, as if they were true. As if somehow this head, out of the whatever it is now, 6 to 8 billion heads on this planet, somehow this particular one is special because the thought appeared here. I don't think so, you know. It's just another thought.
My inner psychology teacher is just so excited. I used to teach many years of Psych 101 in the emotion section. It's lining up very nicely with what you're saying, because there's the 3 components of an emotion. There's the physiological part, right? Things are happening in your body. There's a cognitive component, the labeling, the thought about it, the explanation. And then there's the expression, so you cry or you smile.
Yeah.
But there's those parts that they've separated, and psychology's, I think, worked so hard to just describe what's going on. There's the theories of how they influence each other. First your body reacts and then you think about it, or you look at the situation, you decide what you're going to feel, and then your body reacts. And there's just so many different theories. But meditation and mindfulness and Zen and the Eastern philosophies are more putting it into practice and doing something about it.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I think the other distinction we could probably make there about that, Nellie, is that from my way of seeing it, is that psychology and therapeutic work deals with the content. It deals with it, lets us come to grips with what is going on in my life. What are the things that happen in my family of origin that might make me react the way I am? How can I come to see I struggled with my father or mother or something like that, and address those psychological issues, which in a lot of cases really need to be addressed before we can get to the existential level, or we could call it maybe the spiritual level of coming to see the process, to see that the stories our mind creates are themselves stories. That's really hard to do, isn't it? I mean,
to
look
get
at this.
behind them.
Yeah, this is all feels
them.
so real. And it's not to say that it is not real. It's just not what we take it to be. That's what this process, and I'll just call it a spiritual process, of seeing it's not what we take it to be. So if we look at it as that way, the distinction between those two is that psychological work is needed in a lot of cases when we're really struggling with something at that level. We'll never be able to drop into the existential level if we have that psychological work that needs to be done.
What you teach? Well, let's go back to that question that I was going to ask you. How did you? What was the John Cunningham journey to becoming a meditation and mindfulness instructor?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so it's I guess it's hard. I can tell you a story about what happened. I have no idea how it really came about.
Okay.
But I'll tell you a story about it.
We love stories.
Is it a true story?
No, I don't know. I mean,
What
I guess
true?
what I'm saying, going back to the idea of a story here, I don't know why I'm a meditation teacher, really.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you something, but if I really believe that's why I'm a meditation teacher, I'm caught up in the content of it. But let me tell you one anyway. I'll tell you a story anyway.
All right.
So I guess there's 2 aspects to it. One of them is back about in the 90s, I went through a very difficult personal time, major life change, and it really disrupted my life as I knew it. And that was the foundation for me. I'd always been interested in Eastern thought and philosophies, but I'd never really practiced those things seriously. And with this kind of a situation in my life, it caused me to really question everything and make some big changes. So that brought me into a practice of meditation that I had done as a teenager, but I was really looking for something quite different at that. I think I was looking to get high when I was a teenager, and I wanted an otherworldly experience. And so I sort of set it all aside.
That's pretty unusual for a teenager in America, John.
Yeah, I know. Especially my generation of them, right? So.
Yeah, you're probably the only one.
Yeah. So that was one thing. The other thing is my spiritual quest has always been seeking the truth, looking for the truth, and I could never find it. I had this constant feeling of doubt, no matter what. I was raised Catholic, and I always had a doubt. I tried to believe in God. I always had a doubt, and one of my biggest questions was, does God exist? You know, at different times in my life, I couldn't really say that to people, even, because it was just to say that was almost blasphemous. And what I came to realize was the question is meaningless. The question is meaningless.
What do you mean?
What the question? Does God exist? Okay, first of all, what do I mean by God? What do I mean by that? I didn't know what I meant by that. And then, does he or she exist? What's existence? I don't know what I mean by that. So I was creating a mental construct around some image of God and some image of existence that wouldn't resolve themselves together in a final way for me, and it caused me a lot of spiritual concern. So I found for myself, by dropping that question, I was free to explore truth at a different level. So that was my own practice, I'll say, to come to these Eastern ways of thinking. They gave me permission, I'll say, to explore in a way that my own religious background hadn't given me.
Would you say that it's incompatible with Catholicism or religion?
Not at all. It's very compatible. What it's incompatible with is fixed mindsets that come out of any religious structure or any non-religious structure. That's the difference. It's when we get these fixed views about something and believe them to be accurate representations of reality, all of life undermines those for us. And that's why we struggle so much.
How did you get to that realization? Is it books? Is it talking to people?
It was my own
travel?
experience.
Yeah?
My own experience, yeah. Yeah, when I first got back into meditation, the thing that really first hit me was I could be present to this moment right now in a way that I had never understood before. That the recognition that this moment is all there is nothing else. And it's not the moment between the past and the future. It's not the now that I try to collapse into some small chunk of time. It's this. It's this. It's this. When we're there, when we're here, when it's now, there is no past. There is no future. It's not to say those times didn't happen, things didn't go on. It's not to say things are not going to happen or not happen in the future. But it's never our experience. It's always now. It's always now. Even if you're having a memory about the past, that memory is happening right now. If you're planning or worrying about the future, that's happening right now. It's always now. We have never been anywhere else. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, the truth of that.
And that hit you through meditation,
right?
Through constant, regular...
Through practice, yes.
Practice.
Right.
Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about, like, days on end on a cushion, or...
No, I did a couple of retreats around that time that were powerful because I had never been quiet that long, you know?
Yeah.
The first time I did a silent retreat, I didn't know if I could do it. The idea, one of the things in this idea of silence is not only not talking, but not even making eye contact with another person.
Yeah.
So you're with people for days on end, and you're with them, but you're not with them, you know, verbally or in eye contact, and we
Pretty
really
powerful.
It's very powerful,
intense.
very powerful, but it gives you that capacity, that opportunity, I'll say, to turn inward, to look at what's going on here. Your meals are all taken care of. You have nothing to do except pay attention to what's going on in your mind and body. Well, guess what? There's a lot going on in there. When we do so much to distract ourselves from that the rest of the time, the radio, the television, podcasts, what's the weather like? Are all these things that go on in our life keep this from happening for us. And so to really turn in like that, life is just in here without ever going out there. There's a lot going on to look at.
Before you came in, we were talking, Alex had asked what my practice history was, and I was just commenting that I always feel that I prefer to do it in a group of people and be guided and just be able to surrender and not have to choose the next moment and just, I guess, concentrate. And it seems like a retreat is a good way to do that. You just led a retreat a month ago?
Yes, right.
In July.
Yeah.
So maybe we can come back to that. Did you have a question too?
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to piggyback on what both of you just said. So I went on one of the retreats that John's center put on, right? It was at the Jesuit Retreat Center.
This is the Insight Meditation of Cleveland.
Right.
Yeah, by the way, before I forget to ask, is there an actual affiliation with any of the other Insight meditation centers around the country?
No, it's the Insight meditation community is kind of a loose association. It's sort of a westernized flavoring to a traditional Buddhist kind of practice, but it's not religious. It's really taking the Buddha's psychology and teachings that he had, 2,600 years ago, and putting them into a format that's accessible here in the 21st century United States.
Oh man, I have so much I want to unpack about the last 2 minutes of what you said. So let's talk about retreats, and then I want to talk about Buddhism, and then about fasting from inputs, right? Just like
wait.
Yeah.
Can we please squeeze in some mindful parenting at some point?
For sure.
Yeah,
that's
Please
coming.
don't
That's
leave
coming.
that out.
No, that's
All right,
important.
I'm taking copious notes.
This might be a 2-part episode or something. I'm not cutting anything out. It's okay to have a 2-part. We haven't had one before.
That's a good point. I have to go to a parent orientation in one hour from now.
Very flighty.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay, here.
Sorry.
So first of all, the retreat experience is really unique. The biggest reason it was unique for me was because, just like you said, John, I don't think prior to that, so this was a year ago, April, I had ever been that silent for that period of time, much less a fraction of that period of time, right? Mm-hmm. You meditate for maybe 20, 40 minutes, maybe an hour if you can squeeze that in. That was my experience till then. This was 3 days of silence, right? And being mindful, turning your attention to everything that you're doing, from walking to eating to the schedule to anything that was happening, right? Turning 100% of your attention to that and being silent for a couple of hours, much less 3 days, was such a powerful experience that, I mean, I saw people weeping after a few hours.
Sure.
And what was the woman's name?
Jean Esther.
Yeah. Man, she was so amazing. She did this one exercise where she had this was how we ended the retreat. So powerful.
I was wondering, how strange is that first word you say? After you fast and that first bite of food tastes different?
Well, no, you don't fast.
Well, you fast from speaking.
Yeah, she's talking about
right,
when you
right.
start
First
speaking
word that
again.
you
Stuff
say.
like,
Well, yeah, it is different for sure. But she ended the retreat with this exercise where you sat basically knees to knees with someone else, and you just looked at each other's eyes, right? Which was kind of at first I thought I was getting gonna creep them out, and they were gonna creep me out, right? But she then went through this talk where she said that, something to the effect of, the person that you are, the person into whose eyes you are looking has experienced shame and embarrassment and pain and joy, and she went through all of these emotions the same way that you have, and that was an experience as different and powerful and unique as just the silence, right? And the amount of emotions and the gravity of the intensity of those emotions that you experience in the different ways of being silent that you can be at a retreat is so unusual.
Yeah.
It's so foreign to
Getting inside that space and that you're unfamiliar with.
Walking in silence and paying attention to the way you're walking slowly, eating in silence.
Do we have to worry that you revealed any trade secrets, any things that we shouldn't talk about that happen, like what's happens in the retreat stays in the retreat?
No.
It's okay to share that?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
We don't talk about other people's experiences.
Right.
Is the only difference. So there's times like there's a closing circle at the end, and people sometimes share things there.
Oh, I'm certain you wouldn't. allow
That's the only
that
thing.
to be
But
shared.
what goes on there? No, that's not. There's nothing secret about that at all.
But I guess the point is, and the reason I would encourage anybody within the sound of my voice to experience a retreat at some point is because the experience of silence for more than a few hours is a powerful experience.
Yes, right.
And you don't do it on your own. I mean, Lord knows I've tried to set it, carve out time and protect time at my house or somewhere to meditate for more than 20 or 30 minutes. It just ain't happening.
Right.
Unless you have
I bet
discipline.
John can do it.
Yeah, maybe you can do it, John.
Well, the thing
right.
is, it's
John can do it.
no, it's really, but it's the group setting is very powerful that way. There is, I mean, we're social beings.
Yeah.
And knowing, one of the things I was going to say about the silent retreat, when I did my first silent retreat, when I was done and we started talking, we broke silence, started talking again at lunch on the last day, I felt so connected to those people, so connected to them, because we had been through something
Shared
together.
experience.
It is our nature, not your nature, not an Alex nature and a Nellie nature and a John nature. There's one nature, and we're all coming close to that. And that's what we're really experiencing there. It's a connection that you can't have by just casual conversation. And that's really what happens, I think, when you do the group setting like that.
That and listening to your own neuroses, right?
Right,
Listening
exactly.
to what's happening in your head. And it changes so much. And I remember, too, thinking in that first hour or two, like, this is so uncomfortable. There's no way I could possibly do this for 3 more days.
In the first day of the 3 days?
Yeah, like it was almost painful.
You have to break through that. It seems like you have to go through that.
But that's the thing. And and again, everyone's experience is different, but when you do break through it, it's blissful.
Mm-hmm.
It's like runner's high.
And you know what else happened, John? I remember the Friday that I went in, I had a really contentious negotiation, right? In this litigation that I had going on, and I was filled with anxiety.
Sure.
And I came back on Monday or Tuesday from that retreat, and I had the exact same negotiation with the exact same guys, and I felt like I was Teflon, right?
Yeah.
I felt like, oh, that's so cute what you're saying, right? Like, I mean, you just felt like impervious.
Well, you've just hit the, I think, the essence of a spiritual practice like this is, we're not going to change the world. A lot of people come to meditation thinking, gee, if I learn how to do this, all my problems will disappear. That's not what happens. Our relationship to what's going on is what changes. Because it's not the situation that's the problem. That's a perfect example of it. If it was the situation, how could you have been any different on Monday morning?
Right.
It's our reaction to it. And that's what we do have some control over.
And then it loops around because your perception will change the situation. Your behavior
Absolutely.
changes,
Right.
and it all goes back and
It's
forth.
a cause and effect to it, absolutely.
So I heard a podcast with Joseph Goldstein the other day, and he said, who's another pretty well-known meditation instructor, who said about that relationship with your emotion, that one way to think about it is the next time you say, I am angry, instead of saying I'm angry, you say there is anger.
Right.
Right? Because anger is this emotion that isn't necessarily you. You are not your thoughts. You are
Right.
not your emotions. But the neurons firing in your brain that are creating this sense of anger don't know the difference. Right? So if you can separate yourself from that emotion and say there is anger, there is jealousy, there is resentment, that is, I think, the space that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, because what happens when we say and use those words like I am angry, in that moment we are that anger. That's our totality. I mean, think of your times when you're really angry. Is there anything else?
Right.
Just anger. So this idea of a kind of a practice of seeing anger as arising. I didn't make it happen. And did I do it? No, I didn't do something there. So in a way, I'm witnessing a process that's going on in here. Their anger is arising. And this practice is called insight meditation. The idea where that insight word comes from, or vipassana, is another, it's the translation of the word vipassana. Vipassana is a Pali word. Pali, P-A-L-I, was the language, sort of the high language at the time of the Buddha. And so a lot of his teachings, when they were finally written down many years after his death, were written down in Pali. So a lot of the words we use are these Pali words. So vipassana is translated as insight, and then also as mindfulness now in that sense we're talking about. But these idea of these insights, they're like aha moments, existential aha moments. And when we see the truth that I am not my emotion, when we really see that truth, again, it's like a ton of bricks.
Yep.
It is so powerful to really see that. You can't just say it and have it do justice by saying I'm not my emotions.
Well, and here's the problem. The problem is you forget
Yes.
really quickly. You get looped back into those old habits pretty quickly.
Right.
So I like calling it practicing mindfulness, because you really do need to practice it to keep training that muscle.
Right. I mean, in a way, it's like this whole story we have of a mind, a body, all this experience that is so all over the place, to let that quiet down, the taste that comes from retreats, letting that coming down, and let the world manifest here, as opposed to me having to do the world.
Just be in the world.
Just be in the world,
Yeah.
exactly as it is.
What I hear some folks say is that they don't know if they're doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe actually let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
Right? Is there a right or wrong way to meditate?
Well, I guess what I would say is there's no, if we're talking about the techniques, there's no technique that's got it wrapped up. You can only do it this way. However, I think we have to be careful that it's so easy to say we're meditating when in fact we might be daydreaming.
Yeah.
But what I say, I guess the guideline I would use is if there are words present, we're probably daydreaming to some extent. Because the words are the tool of the cognitive or discursive part of the mind, right? So if we're sitting here and there's chatter going on, and that's where our attention is in that chatter, in that story, to some degree, I mean, we might be trying to pull ourselves back, but to some degree, we're caught up in that story, whether we call it daydreaming or thinking or whatever you want. Meditating is to see that that's what's going on. It's just that awareness of what's going on. That can still be happening, but our relationship to it is different.
Yeah.
Because now a thought comes up, oh, I got to remember to pick up milk on the way home. You can have that thought two ways. You can think, oh, I've got to remember to pick up milk on the way home. And there's a kind of a stress that comes with that, isn't there? Just this little sense of, oh, I got to pick up milk, and I demand something's going to change. This is not okay the way it is. I've got to do something. But if we're aware, oh yeah, my mind is thinking I have to pick up milk on the way home. If we're thinking that, we're present. There's no stress with that thought. No stress at all. We can still put it on a list and pick it up on the way home, but there's no stress.
Right.
So it's that, to me, that's the difference, is if the technique we're using is stress-free, the root of it is stress-free, it's meditation.
So you teach, I'm going to bring this up to make sure we don't forget, you teach a mindfulness parenting class with your wife?
Yes, yeah.
Is that about teaching your children to be mindful, or being mindful as a parent?
What we teach is being mindful as parents.
So it's not teaching your child to recognize and distinguish emotions and labels and being mindful. It's
that comes with it, but
Yeah.
that's not the tool, because it's you gotta have the oxygen mask on your own face before you put the oxygen mask on the little one
Right.
beside you. Like they say in the airplane. And when we parent, so many of us parent from our own insecurities, from our own neuroses, from our own childhoods, the things that didn't go right or were concerned or fearful to us. And when we parent from there, our kids are naturally mindful. They're naturally present. There's no place else for them to be. So we're not giving them the capacity to do that when we're coming at them from these other places. And we're throwing them off all the time.
And you're not aware of it.
You're not even
that
aware
you're
of it.
doing
And then you wonder why your kid is reacting when he was or she was completely thrown off by something you said. It's like, I spilled milk and you're yelling at me. What's the deal? Well, we're yelling at them because somehow we believe you're not supposed to spill milk as a child, or this floor is so important, whatever it happens to
Or
be.
somebody yelled at us.
Somebody yelled at us.
Yeah.
it
So-
almost sounds like a psychoanalysis. Like you have to dig into your own history,
It's
and that sounds.
It's
I don't know
not
if that's what you're doing.
No, because it's not psychoanalysis. Again, that might be required, but it's a different world. It's the world of psychology. This is the world of being present to see what's going on. So I'll give you an
The
example.
process, not the content.
Right. I'll give you an example with our son, our 8-year-old son. We work to raise him from a place of mindfulness. When I am present to him and mindful in what I'm doing, his responses are amazing. They are amazing. When I come at him from, I say John is there, there's all me. When I come at him with that, there's headbutting and everything else. But if I'm able, and this is not a thinking, I've got to remember to be mindful. It's just seeing that what he's doing is happening in this moment. He's unfolding with his anger, his frustration, whatever it happens to be. My mind might have a story. I'm an adult and you're not supposed to speak back to me, because I was told that as a kid. Shut up and don't talk back to your elders. If I hear that story and am able to just let that thought flow out, then I can be, I talk about, my wife and I talk about it as being the space for him to happen in. There's less going on here, and it's more spacious. Then Liam, our son, can happen in that space. So when he says something, he's now reacting to what he said and what he felt, and not to the story that we put on top of it. And so the amazing things that happen are maybe 30 seconds later, he says, I'm angry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that to you. I'm angry. And he will express his emotions that way. I mean, we talk about them. But what an incredible gift to give another human being, to be the space for them to happen in, to just be open to what they need in that moment. And when we do that with our kids, they have this natural capacity to turn inward somehow to see what's going on and to open to it.
So we had this conversation about a year ago, right? I was having kind of a hard time with this. Like one thing that I have learned about myself is that I have a trigger with my kids when they're screaming at me, right? I have a really hard time with that, and I now know I got to leave the room, or I'm going to say something that I'm not going to be able to get back, right? And I remember you saying that to me, John, that as hard as it is, if you let them scream it out and say whatever they're going to say, they will get it.
Yeah.
Right? They'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right? But man, I'm sure I'm not alone, right? As a person who has a trigger like this.
Oh, we all do, I think.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, getting people to realize that parents are in control, are 100% in control of their response.
Yes.
And they can choose not to respond at all and let their kids, so long as they're not hurting somebody
Right.
Or something, especially themselves, it's okay to let them let it all out, right? Without responding. That's a hard thing for a parent to do.
It's very hard, and I think it's especially if you come in cold. Let's say you got a 12-year-old and you come in cold and you've just learned all this mindful parenting stuff. You
Yeah.
think, guess what?
Right.
Timmy, whatever you say goes. It's like it
Right.
doesn't work that way.
Right.
But there are some things that you can use, like one of the things that we do with Liam. We never put him in timeout, but he can call his own timeout.
Yeah.
Anytime, anywhere, no matter what the discussion is, he can take a timeout. So can Lori and I, my wife and I. And if one of us takes a timeout, that's it. I don't care where. If we're trying to get to school and we're going to be late, and he calls a timeout, timeout supersedes getting to school on time. And he uses them judiciously. But it gives him the time to work through what he needs to. It gives us the time to. But it's part of our process. You know, it's not something we just threw out into the mix midway through.
Can I ask? I can actually use some very practical advice here. Do some therapy here for a second. All right. Do you ever have the situation where it's time to go? Right. How old is Liam?
8.
8. Okay. So I've got an 11 and a 13-year-old, but they act like they're 8. So this is perfect. So.
It's time to go.
It's time to go, and from their perspective, it's time to assert my authority, right? So I'm not going, period, right? And the goal, and I've gone to the last mindful parenting class that Lori had, is to create natural consequences,
Right, exactly, yeah.
Instead of imposing your own consequences. So try to be more positive. But I get stuck on that one, right? No, we gotta go, right? And by the way, I'm gonna be late if we don't leave right now, right? And they're saying, no, I'm digging in, I'm digging my heels in, I'm not going. So what does that ever happen to you?
Sure, absolutely.
What? Yeah.
So, and it doesn't always go this way.
Right.
Sometimes it goes, it's not pretty. But again, if you are in a position to be, I'll call it spacious when that happens, you can stop to say, what's ultimately important here? What is the most important thing? Is it being there on time? Is that really the single most important thing, even if it's at the expense of my relationship with my child? Is that more important than that? Or is there something I can do here? And again, doesn't mean we're rolling over and playing dead. It doesn't mean, okay, fine, you win, just do whatever you want. But is there a way to work through the situation, even if you might be late for something? One of the things you can think about is 10 years from now, what are you going to remember about your relationship with your kids when they leave to go to college? What is going to be important? Well, I was on time. We don't have a very good relationship, but by gosh, I was on time. Are we going to be saying that? Or, no, okay, I was late a few times, but look at the way look at the child that's come out of this. Look at the capacity this child has to be present to themselves, to understand what's going on. Again, there's times you still have to say, no, we're going. And this is where I think it's not what you're doing in that moment, it's what your relationship is to it. Because if we are trying to get out of the house and we're coming from our own anger and aversion and frustration, and that's the root of it, chaos will follow. It's not going to turn out the way we want it. But if we're able to find that place of freedom, that place of spaciousness, and come out of that, we're in a much better place to work out and find, well, what's something that would work here? How can I connect with my child in a way that would work here? And even understanding then natural consequences comes more to light. We begin to see how these consequences come out. And
So would you ever in that situation, because I wrestle with this a lot, would you ever in that situation say, okay, Liam, I can tell you really don't want to go, and I don't want to force you to go. And even though it's important for me that we go and that we go on time, I'm going to back off and I'm not going to go. Would you ever do that?
I would, under some circumstances, yeah. I would try to talk more about it, like what's going on for you. What are you feeling?
Yeah.
And at his age, it's still like we do a lot of the body stuff. Where are you feeling? It's in your body, What are you feeling? And he can say, I'm frustrated, I'm really mad, I'm angry. What's going on? What's that feel like in your body? Not so much, sometimes a little bit like, what are you angry about? But more so it's like, where do you feel? Just to connect with that emotion. And when he does that, the emotion tends to quiet down. And as often as not, a few minutes later, okay, well, let's go. I'm ready.
See, now, and that right there is so unusual, right? That takes a lot of deprogramming, because parents in general feel like they need to win.
Right.
They feel like they need to assert their role
Yeah.
as the dad. Right.
Right,
I
exactly.
certainly have.
I know the feeling. I have the same
Yeah.
feeling. It's not like it's not here.
Right. Right. And the you feel like if you don't win here, he's walking all over you.
But what does
Right.
that even mean, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
you know, I think of, because one of the things we come into with mindful parenting, this sounds to some people like spoiling a child. The difference, when we spoil a child, we're doing it for our own convenience. We're doing something for our convenience because we have a want or an aversion that needs to be satisfied in this moment, and the easiest way to do it is to do this. So we're doing something, giving in to our child, giving something to our child, doing something like that for us. When we're doing that from a place of compassion, a place of clear seeing, of this is what leads to what, what's the bigger picture here? Where will this lead in the future? What am I trying to teach my child in this moment? What I'm really teaching him is how adults treat kids, how adults act in a place of their own stress. What do I want my child to learn here? If I'm there when that happens, that's clear seeing. When we come from those places, the outcomes are much more to our long-term liking. They're really the things we're looking for. The Buddha talked about it as being skillful outcomes. So we're much more likely to see those. And our kids, when their own emotions subside, resonate with that because it is the truth for all of us. When we come from that place in ourselves, we resonate with other people, and our kids are just like that.
And I like how you also become a model for
You
this is
become a
what you
model.
do when you feel this
Right.
emotion. This is how you're going to cope with it when you're older.
Exactly.
I'll be the model
Exactly.
for that. I have an infant at home,
Yeah.
so I can only imagine what it will be like when he is yelling at me and telling me he doesn't want to do something. I was also a behavior therapist, so it's like the consequences determine the frequency of the behavior. If you get what you want, you're going to keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But it's really easy right now. He's just a baby, and he's a great baby,
Yeah.
too. He's such a good baby.
So I think one of the things we can work with, like as parents, a lot of times we feel like it's the stick, carrot and stick approach.
Yeah.
It's the stick is what we have to use, not physically, but if you get enough of these consequences, you're going to do what I want. The carrot is a more powerful motivator.
Yeah.
Because what the stick stops the immediate behavior. The carrot trains
Stick
for the
being
future.
punishment.
Yeah, any kind
Okay.
of
I thought
of
it was
consequence.
the stick that holds the carrot out in
No, no,
front. That's not what it.
No, any
Not
kinds
familiar
of.
with the analogy.
I'm sorry. This,
I
what is
get
it,
it
the
now,
donkey, the
punishment
stick,
and
and the
reward.
carrot. Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if it's punishment, those are immediate, and they get what we want right now.
They look like they're effective.
They look like they're effective.
Right.
If you can teach the child to come from their own internal sense of what do I want for myself long term? What are these big picture things that I want? If you're able to teach them, which is more the carrot approach, those skills last a lifetime.
It's a pretty advanced thought process for a infant.
They
We'll
don't
get them there.
and they don't need it. The kid doesn't need this. This is for the parent to understand that each moment, what do I want for my child long term? What do I want for them? What can they learn in this moment? What can be got out of this moment? And it may not always be, I need to get to the store on time or something.
John, if you're a little late in the game to sort of the more positive parenting, more mindful parenting school, right? And you've got children who are, say, 11 and 13, for example, right?
Hypothetically.
There is some history now that you have to overcome.
Right.
Right? And what I heard you say is you can only, well, among the answers is that you can only really control yourself from this point forward.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what you should do, is pay attention to how you are and
Right.
do the best you can. Is
Absolutely, yeah. And if you're able to when the thoughts arise, there's this history, there's two things. One's going to be the self-judgments. Oh my gosh, why didn't I get this 11 and 13 years ago? Says now our judge comes up in us and starts beating us with it. And so we're able to see that's just part of the process. We can, thank you, Judge, for having an opinion about this, but I don't need to work with that right now because this moment is all there is. This is it. That thought doesn't have anything to do with this moment
Right.
if I don't let it. Now, if it drives this moment and becomes the source of what I act in, because it'll be aversive, right? I'll feel frustrated and upset and act out of those things if I let that judging mind be the driving force there. But if I can, however much I'm capable of doing it, set the judging mind aside for the moment and see, what does this moment ask of me? What do these children ask of me right now? I like the words when being around other people, the idea of a noble being as opposed to a child or another person. Let's get the skin out of it. Let's get the history out of it. Let's get the looks, the age, all of it.
Connotations of the
All
word
the
child.
connotations of all that stuff. There is a divine spark of some sort, something that we feel in each other, something that we resonate with. What is that in this little one asking for right now? What is being asked for? If I can rest in that question and watch what comes up for me, it's amazing how many times the right answer comes up. If it's the judging mind comes in and says, no, you have to da-da-da-da-da-da, whatever the story is, and I act from that, it doesn't go so well.
Yeah.
But it never changes, though. It never changes.
Right.
Alex.
This is John's answer to the question. So we ask our guests questions ahead of time. And the question, Nellie, that you asked was, what are you working on right now that you'd like to share with our audience?
Expecting something like we have this big project coming
Yeah.
up or this big event and get
Right.
the word out. And
John's answer was finding peace and joy in the moments of our lives.
awesome answer.
That's awesome. That was a
Love it.
great answer, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Um,
it. That's all there is.
So, all right. You're right. I've got a million other questions, but we're going to go to the lightning round
We're just
questions
gonna-
here.
We're going to have them back.
Yeah.
if that's
For
okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, maybe we can collect questions from the listening
Ooh,
audience.
that's a great
We haven't
idea.
had any second visits from anyone yet.
Yeah.
So always, when you're listening to older episodes, listeners, feel free to ask questions for the next visit by that person.
Well, and we've been meaning to get a little Q&A going with our 57,000 listeners at home.
I think you mean to pick a random number, but it's always 57,000.
I don't know why. I think that's because I'm trying to manifest 57,000 listeners.
We're going to hit it.
So if I could just say something to the people listening
Yeah.
and hearing this stuff, as you feel resistance to any of the things you've heard and the questions arise around that resistance, please send those questions in. And even if
Yeah.
I don't come back, maybe you guys could forward them to me. I'd be
For sure.
happy. Those need to be addressed. This is what happens when we hear something like this. There's all these resistances.
Yeah.
The world doesn't work that way. What do you mean it's not real? What is this? I can't raise my children that. Listen to those voices and see what's going on there, because that's how we work through these things. So those questions are really important.
Turn resistance into dialogue.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Ooh.
This could be a really good creation of a forum on the website. So to get those questions to us,
You want me to create a forum on the website?
well, where would people send questions?
Each episode? This is a good question, Alex.
That's why I'm asking it.
When you look at an episode on the website, on its page, there's a place to enter comments.
There you go. And what
Let's
is
do it there, because then every episode has its
Right.
own page already.
So that's thebestpodcastever.com.
Well done.
And you're going to go to the John Cunningham episode, and you're going to post your questions there. And John will
That's a great
might
idea.
answer them if we impose on his time further.
I
Let's
would be
impose.
happy to.
Yeah.
Anything
Okay.
there.
Lightning round.
Lightning round
ding,
questions.
Ding, ding, gong.
Do you have a?
I play a gong
A
every
gong,
time we
okay.
start the lightning round.
All right,
Not a
John.
vocal one, a real sound effect one. Lightning round.
Ready? John, what was your biggest success?
To this point, so far.
Right.
This moment right now.
Oh, I love it.
He would.
This moment.
No,
right
Of course
now
he
is
would.
the best.
That's
the
great, isn't
best.
it? We're here. It's
And
now.
all of this moments that have happened.
At
all
that
of the
time they were,
moments.
yeah, but right now this one is.
What he's saying.
This
Let's
one's.
stick with this moment.
Okay,
Yeah, right
sorry.
now.
And now-
This is
This
beautiful, isn't it, guys? Look
It
at
is.
this.
I'm loving
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Biggest failure, using any definition for the word failure that you want to use.
So if I could answer it two ways. One is anytime my mind thinks it should be doing something and things don't go that way, there's a psychological sense of failure. I don't really care about those. They're just part of the story.
Yeah.
So from the other sense, there's no such thing as failure.
Right.
There just isn't.
So in the first sense, that happens a lot.
Sure, sure.
So a lot of failures.
Sure.
on
It's
using
playing-
that first definition.
Right, and it's playing that story,
Yeah.
you know. You get a ticket. I got a ticket for running a red light
Right.
a few years ago, so I stopped running red lights. you know.
Right. So the third lightning round question is usually posited by Molly Gebler, who
I
usually
can ask on her behalf.
Please.
Has there been a particularly influential female figure in your life? I don't want to load the question up by continuing.
Yeah.
Is there a female
But I will anyway.
influence,
Yeah.
a sort of mother figure or mother?
That is exactly how Molly would
Isn't
ask
that how she
question.
would ask?
Yeah.
I wish she wouldn't throw in mother because she wants people to say it's their mother. But I just did it. It's because I'm sitting in her seat. But I think it's more intended to be just like the female influence.
She started to say maternal.
Maternal.
I think, for that reason. But I think then she backs down and says any female.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for any female, it's definitely my wife, Lori. I mean, she's just an incredible mother and wife and person, woman. And to be able to do this journey with her, this parenting, to have our lives unfold together is just, it's amazing. I come from a family with an incredible mother who taught us how to love. My mother taught us what the meaning of love was. I have 4 beautiful sisters. So there are many female models in my life that, there were 7 of us all together. And it's just like, so all of them, I mean, that whole feminine energy, you know, one side of us is just so powerful. But
Do you have a
those ones-
cute how you met your wife story?
Well, I don't know that it's cute. We were working on it. She's a Baha'i, as I am, and we were working on a Baha'i program, a convention together. We're both on the committee together, and we were friends for a couple of years before we started dating. And
That's a cute story.
yeah, is that okay?
No,
that
it's
qualifies
right?
cute.
It's
Okay,
enough for
all
me.
right, good.
All right. The final lightning round question, I can't wait to hear the answer to this, is what is, it's such a silly question, an embarrassing thing that nobody knows about you?
Or story that happened?
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
that's true.
There's
I
2
should've-
different
yeah.
kinds of...
An embarrassing
Yeah.
thing that happened or an embarrassing thing that nobody knows. Nobody or very few
There you
people
go.
know about you.
No, what happened? There's a lot of them, so let's see. Yeah, I don't know that I don't know what I've got for that. I think a lot of them are around language and the things that I don't.
Slips of the tongue.
Yeah, or things that I just never knew. You know, just things like I didn't know until a couple of years ago that it's for all intents and purposes. I thought it was for all intensive purposes.
That's a common
Is
mistake.
it? I mean, but I have a lot of those. There was one that came up just yesterday, but I have a lot of those types of things.
It's kind of like singing the wrong song lyrics, right?
Yeah.
All
I'm
along.
thinking of some.
I think the other thing that is probably that, you know, as a Dharma teacher, people look at me as kind of a spiritual type person. I have a whole other life as a work person, you know, guy in business, and they don't think of me as, you know, this Dharma teacher. So it's like I leave this 2 lives. And if they saw each other, you know, that would be...
People are surprised by that. I
I
would
think
think
they
you
would
just
be, yeah.
emit that sort of energy even at work.
Yeah,
We
well,
never got to talk about your
yeah,
work, but
yeah.
I wanted to bring it up.
So I see that as different. I sing a lot in the car, as loud as I can. So
Yeah.
That's a good one.
What do you like to sing along to? What do you listen to?
well, it's coming out of here usually from my head, so it's not like I'm singing to the radio or anything. Just whatever song pops into my head.
Okay.
So
I thought you were going to have like some story about how you were at a retreat and you fell asleep, but nobody realized because you were meditating. They thought you were meditating the whole time, or I don't know.
I
Turned out you were
thought
asleep the whole time.
this was going to be my prediction because you managed to turn a lot of the questions into very like impersonal answers and broad and general and like talking about success and failure as they are rather than very personal for you.
mhm.
And I thought maybe that's what would happen with the embarrassing situation question, but that's a hard thing to do with that question.
Well, I could have answered it that way, but I'm not trying to be aloof either, you know.
I don't think you do it on purpose.
It's not an intention to do that. So.
All right, kids. So, John, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
here.
that was a really good one.
So let's say someone is interested in learning to meditate, they can go to Cleveland.org.
Right. That IM is for Insight Meditation.
Insight Meditation.
So that is one of countless places to go. We don't have anything that's unique, and it's not that they should go to our site.
But you have a calendar on that site.
We have a calendar.
Your
so
schedule.
Yes, right. So we have groups that meet around town in pretty much all the areas of town. Shaker Heights, the West Side, a couple of groups that meet over there. Down in Bath, one in Brecksville. So it's a great way for people to just experience it. There's no cost, no obligation.
And that's
nothing to
different
believe.
people leading those. Or are you doing all of those every day of the week? You're somewhere different.
No, I lead the one in Shaker Heights every other week, and my wife Lori, she goes the other weeks. I lead the one in Bath. I lead one of the ones on the West Side, and then we have other people who lead some of the other groups as well. So. Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities there. There's one in North Royalton, but there are other ways to connect with us too. You know, so if you are interested in meditation and there's something in your church or your religion as a way to get in touch with it, you might investigate that. There's so much out there, you can easily be overwhelmed. So it's good to find a group, whether it's ours or some others, to see you're working with somebody to narrow the field so you don't get too much stuff. But yeah, everybody's welcome to our groups. They're open, and again, there's nothing to believe, nothing to buy, which I love that.
Well, I think I'd love to go into the mindful parenting group. Is there information for that?
We have a sign-up sheet for that. So right now we haven't got our fall program going yet, but we hopefully will have that soon. And that meets once a month. And usually there'll be a little talk about some aspect of parenting. Well, you were there, Alex, one of them. And then there's discussion time for people in the group to talk about their own experience with it. So it's not just hearing something. We also share resources, mindful parenting resources, books, and other things people can use. So there's usually 2 of those a month. One is a morning group that Lori leads, and then there's usually one in the evening or a weekend that both of us work on.
John, are there any retreats coming up?
Yes, we have a retreat coming up in October, from October 13th to 15th, so it's a weekend retreat. It starts Friday evening, the 13th of October, at dinner time, and ends on Sunday, the 15th, at lunch. And between that time, you stay at the retreat center, which is the Jesuit Retreat House in Parma. All your meals will be included. This is the only thing we ever charge for, because the retreat center charges us. So information about the retreat can be found on our website, which is www.imcleveland.org. The IM is for Insight Meditation of Cleveland.org. So you can find information about it there. We have a calendar that has it as well.
Is it appropriate for someone that doesn't have any experience?
It is. It's fine for somebody who doesn't have any experience. If you have any trepidation about doing something like that as a starting point, there's a contact form on there, and you can send an email to me, and I'll be happy to talk with you by phone or by email, just to alleviate that trepidation. The trepidation is a story of the mind. So as soon as we work through that, which doesn't take too long, then the retreat is usually a wonderful experience for people.
It sounds wonderful.
I totally have to go.
Yeah, you do.
I will say this. There are great apps on your phone.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to get into meditation, there's Headspace. There's Insight Timer is awesome.
Timer,
You use Insight Timer too, right?
Yeah, Insight Timer is an app. You can put it on Android or
Yeah.
iPhones, and there's a group in there called Insight Meditation. You can see how many other people are meditating, and you can join this little group of Insight
Online.
Meditation, so you have that idea of a community. Yeah.
And then there's one called 10% Happier, which I've been using a lot
Oh
lately.
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
awesome.
Dan Harris.
Yeah.
All right.
John, thank you very
You're
much.
very welcome.
John.
Nellie,
Very
thank
welcome.
you very much.
guys.
Thank you, Alex.
You were a great Molly today.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Molly, hope you had fun moving your daughter in.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Meg Potkin.
Hi, Alex Gertzberg.
How are you?
I'm dandy.
Good. Meg, you are the newest addition to the Gertzberg Law Firm, I think, yes?
Yes,
How do you like it so far?
I love it.
You do?
I
What
do.
What do you love about it?
I feel like I'm doing all of my favorite parts of practicing law.
Like what?
Well, I do estate planning, and one of the things I really like about it is I like problem solving with my clients. I like sitting down and helping them figure out how to accomplish what it is they want to do. I like not fighting and arguing. I like working proactively.
Probably not a lot of fighting and arguing in what you do, I would imagine.
No.
Or little of it, right?
True.
And what you do is, let's go through it. Estate planning.
I do estate planning. I do special needs planning for folks who might have a special needs child or relative or someone who needs to set money aside for that. We do charitable planning, setting up family foundations and setting up charitable trusts. I do elder law and Medicaid planning, so helping folks qualify for benefits at the end of life.
Estate planning. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
What is it?
Well, estate planning is basically telling the world what you'd like to have happen when you're not around to call the shots. So a lot of people have a misconception that you have to have a lot of money to do an estate plan. And I think actually estate planning is even more critical when you have less, because you don't want to put your family to an expense to administer your assets, meaning to get things transferred into the names you want them to be in.
I'm a lawyer, and I definitely spent most of my adult life believing that because I wasn't a millionaire, I've got no use for an estate plan, right? And it actually wasn't until very recently that I realized that couldn't possibly be further from the truth, right? So why is A, do you think that that's a common misconception, and B, why?
Oh, I definitely think it's a common misconception. I think, first of all, people think that it has to cost a lot of money, and it doesn't. I think it can be much more reasonably priced than people think. I think people believe that it's all about the assets, and it isn't necessarily all about the assets. If you have children, one of the most critical things you have to do is designate guardians for them in the case that something happens to both parents. And imagine what might happen if you didn't do that. If you want them to be raised by people that share your values and your philosophy of parenting, that's really important.
Right. So certainly cash and investments have their own role. Children have their own role in an estate plan. What about personal property?
Personal property does too. And actually there are some very easy things you can do that people don't even realize, titling things in particular ways that eliminate any need for the court to ever be involved. And also leaving specific gifts, things that are family heirlooms or pieces of jewelry that were inherited or have particular meaning.
So, and then estate plan is such a, seems like a broad, it would cover a lot of things, right? I mean, what are the more common documents that somebody would see in an estate plan?
Well, typically you have a will, which says, this is what I want to happen to my things when I die. But oftentimes you also have what's called a living trust. And what happens with a trust, when you use a trust for estate planning, you allow things to pass to someone else without having a probate court involved, which saves a tremendous amount of money and effort and angst really for your family. Then normally you would have a living will document which says, here's what I'd like to happen to me before I die when I'm sick. And then you would want to have powers of attorney, because what's more likely, we all die at some point, but what's more likely to happen sooner rather than later is you'll have some situation where you can't act on your own behalf. And so you need people who can act for you. Might be because you're sick, might be because you're out of the country, whatever. So you have a financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney so that somebody can act for you, someone you trust.
Burial instructions?
That's often a component, and especially if you have particular sensibilities about that.
Right. What's a typical example of someone needing a trust rather than a will?
Well, I think most people really benefit from both. A trust is just a bucket that you put things in, right? And that bucket passes from one hand to the next without the court having to pass it off.
Okay.
And that's a good way to describe it. And when you have what's called a living trust, you can put things in the bucket, you can take things out of the bucket, and there are no restrictions on that.
And as a non-estate planning attorney, I have some basic understanding that a trust keeps you out of the probate process. Right?
True. Yes.
What does that mean to a person, even more of a lay person than me?
So if I die and my bank accounts are titled to just to me, my husband would have to go to the court and get permission from the court to transfer the title to himself. He would have to get permission from the court to transfer title to the house, to the cars, to other things that I might own. And every time you step in the courthouse, it costs you money. It drags things out. It takes time. And it also, for some people who value their privacy, it can be a little invasive.
Right. Whereas with a trust, what's that process instead of, so you don't have the process you just described. What's the trust process look like?
Well, the trust process, you title your bank accounts, you own them as trustee of your trust, and the trust document tells the bank what to do with those accounts when you are no longer the trustee and you're not there. So the court doesn't ever have to be involved, which keeps things private, and it also keeps things less expensive.
Okay. So client comes to see you, they make an appointment. Give our listening audience, Meg, a sort of an idea of what they would expect if they made an appointment with you and were counseled by you on what is the appropriate path for them relative to an estate plan.
Well, usually the first thing I do with my clients is find out what's on their mind and what's the thing they're most worried about. Are they most worried about their family? Are they worried about their health and how that might affect the end of their life? For example, are they concerned about qualifying for Medicaid at some point? I want to know if there are assets they own with other people that they want to think about how that will be managed. If they have children that might have special needs that they need to take care of. So my first question is always, what's on your mind and what worries you the most? How can I help alleviate those worries? And then we talk about what they have and how to structure that. But I want to know what they're worried about and what they want to see happen in the future.
So it starts with a conversation about what's on their mind. It then goes to a planning phase. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, usually, we'll spend a little time getting to know each other so I understand their mindset, what's on their minds, and then we'll talk about what their vision is for how they'd like to see things happen in the future for their families, or particular charities, other things they might be interested in. And then we work out a plan to get them there.
And then once that plan is worked out, then it goes to a documentation phase. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay, and then after so then you create the documents, and then there's a signing ceremony.
Yep,
so
that's
those
exactly
are the
right.
Basic phases of the process.
Yes.
Which, by the way, it would seem like if someone, you always hear about, these inexpensive wills that they can create on like LegalZoom. Doesn't seem like that would be amenable to the kind of process that you just described.
Well, it isn't because, quite frankly, one size doesn't fit all.
Right.
Not everyone has the same interests. And a lot of those wills, part of the issue is in Ohio particularly, there are really specific requirements for the way wills have to be signed and witnessed. And if it's not done correctly, you might as well not have done it at all.
Well, and that's not to cut on LegalZoom. I'm sure it's done a lot of good for a lot of folks. But I mean, I think that's probably true of law firms in general. I mean, I guess one of my takeaways might be that if your lawyer doesn't go through that kind of collaborative get to know you process and ask lots of questions and give you the feeling that you've really communicated what really concerns you, make sure that you have done that with your lawyer, whoever you choose.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a really personal process. I mean, we're talking about your family, right? So one of the things that I like to do with my clients that not all lawyers do is I follow up with them every year and just say, has anything changed? You know, the people that you named as guardians for your kids, are they still around? Are they still people that you trust and want to raise your kids? Have your circumstances changed? And a lot of lawyers don't do that. And I think that's really important. It's a personal relationship.
Awesome. Thanks, Meg. That was helpful.